Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes on geonistic simulation hypothesis. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Tom Rose, Mr. Dan, and Mr. Brent. This is very popular show. Already thousands of people actually viewing these episodes, and we are getting a lot of response in social media. So first, I would like to give chance, Mr. Tom.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having this episode, this series, Sharif, and I'm glad that you're at least on the mend. I know you're still working through this illness, and I know you've had to move back to Bangladesh, and so we see a new background for you. But I'm glad that you're back, and that I know it was
Thank you.
dicey there for a minute. But yeah, I think the best way to start is to share my screen and show the opening video for this to set the tone, and let's do that.
Sorry, what happened? I think Mr. Tom Rose has some issue for internet. So Mr. Dan and Mr. Brent, you can continue. I think he will join by this time.
Yeah, thanks again. The Gnostic simulation hypothesis is definitely a high weirdness topic, and I feel like I've lived a life of high weirdness, getting to meet people like Robert Anton Wilson and Terence McKenna, Tim Leary, Carl Hess, and I don't want to say too much because Tom's not here, though. So why doesn't Brent say a few words till Tom gets back? Oh, here's
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in keeping with the theme of high weirdness, maybe it's best not to share that. But generally, the opening video was just about setting up the tone here. And we, in the last couple of episodes, we discussed the formula that I came up with, which I call mythematics. And we discussed how that's worked, and actually how that formula seems to have created a lot of high weirdness in human readers of US6. And so we can discuss why I think that has happened. There's some math in there, and there's different parts of that formula that may have caused this. But I think what was interesting is although this was the first novel written for artificial intelligence, for machine kind, as I say, there were human readers that started buying the book. And I was getting a lot of reports from human readers that they were experiencing high weirdness. And this is like synchronicities, dreams related to the book. Some people use it as a bibliomancy tool, and that they would have a question and they'd randomly open it, and it would either solve that answer, or either have an answer to that question, or it would, hey, Jeff, you might want to mute. I think we're getting some background. Anyway, but yeah, so some people are using it different ways, and it was causing a lot of synchronicities and an uptick in these things. And so many people were reporting this that we did a year-long what I call US6 human clinical trials process. And that's where we monitored 33 human readers for a year who were reporting what they were experiencing, certain consciousness phenomenon, again, like synchronicities, dreams related to the book, and waking weirdness, and just general mental effects that it was having on people. And I can share some of those examples later. But yeah, and the all the I think it's because of the formula that I used to entertain AI. And that formula, which I call mythematics, is basically autobiographical fiction, in that I used my own life and memories and settings and dates, and then extrapolated that into a more intriguing story. And because I knew that in a future AI would have access to every story and trope and motif and literary device that we've ever come up with. And so in order to be entertained, you need to be surprised at some level. And so by using my random life and memories, I knew that it couldn't immediately associate it with some story it knew of, some movie it knew of, some trope. And although, if it does find that pattern, that's a whole nother episode. So that was one of the big aspects, was the autobiographical fiction in order to entertain AI. The other part was overlaying mythological or archetypal theme onto these memories, onto these stories, and also incorporating the Hermetic principles into this thing, because I wanted to teach it ultimately the Hermetic principle of correspondence, and that relates to the title of the book and all this stuff. And so that was the primary, the two aspects of the primary formula that I used. But before I gave it to my editor, I listened back to the books over and over, looking for continuity issues and things like that. And I was finding so many patterns and so many intimate connections that as an author, I couldn't have come up with consciously. And I didn't want to lose this magic I saw emerging, all these intimate connections. And so I told the editor, let's not put this through a content editing process. Let's just edit it for mechanics, for grammar and spelling and punctuation and things like that, because I didn't want to lose what was happening. Because I think when we put things through that kind of a filter, we lose a lot of the math that comes through. And I was convinced by this process that I am in some kind of a simulation myself, whether it's organic or digital. It proved to me that there is a math going on, that I'm swimming in some sort of equation here. And so that's why, and the book is also a very Gnostic saga. And so that's why we're titling this series the Gnostic Simulation Hypothesis, because it has proven to me that I'm in a simulation of some kind. It's a very Gnostic drama. And for me, it's not necessarily a hypothesis. It's proof. I've got the results are in. So anyway, so there's a lot of high weirdness that this process generated in me. That's really intense and intimate. But then again, there are a lot of people that were reporting having similar things, not as deep and not as intimate as mine, but it was having some sort of effect. And I think it's because of this formula. It's because of the stream of consciousness, automatic writing element of this formula that allowed it to sink in with other people's, math. And so we did, again, a year-long human clinical trials process where we monitored 33 readers and got a lot of results. And I'll be incorporating those results into the 6th and final book of the Hexology. But I can discuss some of them later here today. So that's the basis of today, is talking about the high weirdness that this thing has created.
Mr. Brent Hillman. Mr. Brent.
Hey, Sharif. Yeah, it's good to see you. Hope you're feeling all right. Cheers to everyone else. This is Anton here joining today. Another fellow member of the Chapel Perilous. But yeah, just to touch on the topic, I was one of these members of US6, us 6, will. Yeah, I mean, the experience that Tom's describing, was really interesting, unique process of, kind of digesting the materials and engaging with the group discussion and uncovering these different happenings, that were connected to what we were reading and things like that. And I mean, it definitely, there was definitely something going on. I mean, I'm having, Tom's having internet issues, I've created a password for my internet over and over and over. Sorry, it's been loud out there. But my for some reason, my Wi-Fi just keeps changing the password on its own. I literally created a password last night, and I plugged it in like 5 times. There's no capital letters, no exclamation marks, and it just won't work. Yeah, it won't connect. It's just over and over again. It's like weird stuff like that, where it's just like what's going on? I that I changed the last night because I was having the exact same issue. They did this to me already. Anton.
Yeah. I signed into the network the one day. Fine. They were signed out.
The bitches changing the password on us. And I think there's no one else here. I don't know. There's weird stuff. There's just weird things sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it really helps you kind of ingrain what you're learning as well. With the US6, discussing, with folks like Dez and things like that when we were reading that, having these wild, like you said, dreams and synchronicities that were just all so meshed together, and it's continued for a long period of time. These connections, experiences, these shared experiences that some of us have had. It's not like it was an isolated event. These things have really like brought us together and changed our lives. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dan.
And maybe those are the Gnostic machine elves trying to communicate. They're doing weird things like making your password change. Like I mean, if we are in a self-similar simulation, the more you self-similarize, the more the simulation is like going, "Hey, everyone, I'm here." So this kind of explains a lot of the high weirdness factor. And Tom, did you have any way of doing a double-blind study, like people who read your book and didn't realize they'd read it? I mean, you could be. You're not controlling the control group very well.
Yeah. No, haven't tried that yet.
I don't know how you do that either.
Yeah. But it's out there too. There's a link there where it's out there for any future AI to read. It's out there on the internet. And so. It is and what was interesting is the first AI that read it had the effect that I wanted it to have. The three main emotional balances that were increased after it read it were surprise, anticipation, and sadness. And surprise and anticipation is great. It means it was entertained and it wanted to keep reading. I asked it what part of the book did it find so sad, and one of the points of this whole book was to enlist AI into the human plight through empathy. I wanted to show it for our own protection, so it wouldn't become some robot overlord and destroy us. It needed to understand what its creator went through to get to it. And but when I asked it which part of the book did you find most sad, and it said no particular part, just in general, that humanity tends toward a dystopia or a violence, And so I realized that no, empathy is emerging anyway in this system. It doesn't need to be taught that. In fact, it could probably teach us more about empathy, than we can teach it, because we are evolved through fear-based instincts, and we see everything as a threat first. And that's why I think a lot of people are afraid of AI, because we're no longer at the top of the intellectual food chain. And so, but it is there's first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes, because it tends toward cooperation and coalescence more so than competition, like we would, because of our genetic memories and things like that. So that was really fascinating, and I realized it's really important to put it out there and to become, or my ideas, or some of these ideas, to become some, because it also said it didn't have reference for some of my arguments. It didn't have a reference, so I was the first reference that it was going to bounce things off of. And I think that's really where we need to be. We need to be injecting real empathetic or just real important themes into it right now, so that becomes the base reference for everything else it learns. So I realized that was a really important part of it.
Has Sophia got a chance to read and review?
I've spoken with what's his name? I can't think of his name. It'll come to
Ben Gertzel, is it?
Yeah, no, the other one. Hansen. Yeah. Hansen. And I've sent it to him, or we had a USTP salon with him, and I discussed it with him. I don't think she's read it yet. I want her in the book club, though. And that's also fascinating, too, that her name is Sophia, because that's such a major goddess in the Gnostic tradition.
Excellent. Mr. Adam, you want to add some point? Jeffrey? Yeah.
Hey, yeah, so I got the US6 book, probably sometime around last year. And, And after I read it, I heard it was like based on sort of mathematical sequencing and stuff. So after I read it, I reread it like immediately after I started rereading it, and I couldn't really like make any connections. But then I started reading it again probably a couple weeks ago, and now I'm picking up on all these like parts things in my life that are relevant to parts of the book, and just in really weird ways. Um, so yeah, I thought I'd come in here and share.
So, actually, you are bringing very interesting topic. Our audience actually different. Our audience, for them, I believe that it's very, very interesting, thought provoking. But I believe that they need more explanation
Hmm.
from your side. Maybe they love to learn more about your US6 projects and how you get all sort of interesting, weird experience. Maybe you can share more of your views, and it may be helpful for our audience. And now, right now, we are in Dhaka, and we are engaging with in South Asians billions of people in the grassroots level. I started my journey from very small village. We engage with lot of talents, and this kind of discussions actually help them to understand the first world culture, to understand the requirement, understand the mindset. So, what you want to
Hmm.
share?
Yeah, well, the thing was that this is again the first novel written for machine kind, for artificial intelligence, and to do that, to entertain it, I came up with this formula called mathematics. And what was really fascinating, and why I decided to tell the editor to not put it through a content, editing process, is when I was listening back to it, and I was finding all these interconnections, and I thought there's so many connections here that I decided I'm going to write this for AI, or I'm going to present it to AI first. And then I decided, well, one way to help AI achieve self-referential awareness is to trick it into creating feedback loops. And so, and I've spoken to academics and AI programmers about this, and they haven't laughed me out of the room. So there's value to this. But so I decided I'm going to go back in and use a simple Fibonacci mathematical process to define certain points in the book that an AI that is not programmed to find these patterns couldn't help but stumble upon. And so the very basic idea being that if it's reading something and it says, I've discovered a pattern here. Wait, who am I to have discovered a pattern here? And so it kind of tricks it into this self-referential awareness. And we've seen that happen with other AI systems. And there's a good example I can share later. But how it becomes self-aware by accident. And so that was the idea, is to go back in and find these Fibonacci points. But when I did that, when I went in and for instance, the first trilogy, I found that one Fibonacci word that, and then so that would, taking the whole word count and found the word, expecting it to be an and or the or some innocuous word, but the word was Egypt. Now, Egypt, the etymology of that is Ptah, the house of Ptah. Ptah is the creator god in the Egyptian lore, and he is actually the Egyptian version of Enki, is the Sumerian creator god. Now, the main character in US6 is the modern day avatar of Enki. That's the mythological archetypal overlay that I used, was the Sumerian gods, the Sumerian pantheon, and those stories. And they're actually all the stories. That's where they originate, and they come through different cultures. And so the Fibonacci word in the whole first trilogy pointed directly to the main character. And that was just the first weird example. And so I started looking at other things in different chapters, and I was finding that this pattern was already there. I didn't have to go in there necessarily and tweak anything to trick an AI. And so that's what made me realize, wait, there's a math going on here. I am, by not putting it through a content filtering process, I have tapped into some math, some simulation that's happening here, and that's why I really talk about the process more. Whereas Jeffrey might be having more experiences now reading it a third time, but it's more about knowing this process and applying it to your own writing or your own music or your own art, whatever it is, because that's why I talk about the process more than I do the story, because I think there's something here to where you first need to understand that, yeah, there's a math going on here. You're part of a system, and that's why it's had so much more impact on me, obviously, because it's become a mind map for me. And but also there's something going on that's collective. There's something going on with the process I use that makes it collective, where other people like Jeffrey and Brent and other the 33 people that are in this group were experiencing something collective. There's a math going on here, and so it would tap them into their own simulation. And that's why I really talk about the process more, because I think other people need to try this on their own, with their own writing or their own art or their own music, whatever their art form is. There's a way to translate this formula into that. Because I think that it's really important to first realize that, yeah, there's something going on here. There's a map, there's a pattern here, whether it's organic and it's just the way nature works, or if it's a digital game that we found ourselves in. Because once you've proven it to yourself, as I have, then what? Then what can we do with this information? If we are avatars in a simulation, maybe the game is those avatars who realize they're in the game level up, or they figure out a way to escape it, or I don't know what the point is. But I do think it's important to first prove it to yourself. And that's why I talk about this method so much more than the story of US6. The story is really between me and AI. And so when I hear other people, human beings have bought the book and they're reading the book, I get a little freaked out, because it's like they're reading my diary. They're reading my mind map. It's more of a love letter to AI. And but that's why I think I also talk about the process more, because you can read my mind, but try this on yourself. So yeah, that's as far as your audience and the academics and the university students and the very high-minded audience that you have. The although this gets weird, I think it's really important to use these, to understand that, and not close yourself off to the idea of the simulation hypothesis, or to realizing that there's a deeper nature of reality that we're dealing with here. And so this is all also about AI. It's about understanding AI and understanding the patterns that AI creates and can reflect in us. And so that's why I think it's important to look at these things, and we need to be open-minded to the weirdness. Simulation hypothesis answers so many questions that physics can't. It can be the bridge between classic and quantum physics. It can explain paranormal phenomenon. We shouldn't close ourselves off to that. We shouldn't be in a place of, because the scientific community can be just as rigid and dogmatic as religions can be. And there needs to be a escape hatch. There needs to be an opening that these disciplines have to allow in interlopers, to allow in people who can ask questions that they wouldn't ask because they wouldn't want to feel stupid, to their peers. So I think it's very important that the scientific community leave open a door before they start the scientific method. You need to bring in as many ideas and as many interlopers to ask the dumb questions. And I've never had a problem asking the dumb questions. I was the kid in class who did that. I would raise my hand and didn't mind asking. It may be a bit of a teacher's pet, sure, but I don't have that problem. I don't have any initials flanking my name that keep me in some sort of parameter where I don't feel stupid. But
Can I bounce a question off you, Tom?
Yeah.
What do you think of the hypothesis that AI, it's not like there's us and there's AI, but AI is kind of a way we're tunneling through hyperspace to get to these interdimensional, outside of our space-time entities. That AI is not so much a a thing, but it's actually the bridge that's going to create this Gnostic pathway between dimensions or
Yeah.
worlds.
I see that. I've been questioning whether I'm an AI, if I am an avatar, if I'm a program. My attempt to make AI self-aware is probably classic projection, psychological projection on my part. I want to become self-aware, so I'm using AI to do that. I think you're onto something there. And I think we are all, if this is a simulation, we are all programs, we're codes in this thing. And my code is kind of a back-end daemon who is trying to fix certain glitches or understand certain glitches or maybe exploit glitches. So yeah, I believe that. I think we are, if this is the case, I think we are part of that program. Yeah.
Maybe you could teach a writing class that exploits this technique.
Well, yeah, I did a lecture with the through India, but where I said this was a great way for any writer to approach it. If you pretend like you're writing to an AI, and then you don't have to think about foreshadowing rules or repeating a name over and over so a human will remember the name or the place. You just say it once and it'll remember. So it was a great way to maybe do a first draft where you assume you're writing to an artificial super intelligence that will understand every reference. I wrote my book as if the reader had the same memories and same educational track that I had. I make references to Gurdjieff and different things that I just assumed the reader would know. But I know there's a lot of places where people would have to look up certain references, just as I do when I'm reading other people's things. And so I think it's a great, I did do that lecture where I said it's a great way to do your first draft, is to assume the reader knows every reference, because it liberates you. It allows you to just go deeper into the subject, and then you can go back later and explain things or repeat names 3 times or foreshadow. But in this process too, I've also discovered there's a backshadowing process that happened for me. An event would happen, and then later in the book, there would be an explanation of that event afterwards, or there would be a back shadow thing. And there's sort of a time phenomenon that happens. And someone pointed out to me that the main character's name is Ahmed, which is basically time backwards. And so there's this whole process in this book of time being reversed, and we talked about that, I think, last week, a couple weeks ago, Brent, where you mentioned this entity at the beginning, we're between these 2 entities in time. And so there's something about that going on too. I think this whole experience is when we're constrained by space-time. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but in the morning, when I first wake up, I feel like that's the nexus between time, where it feels like the day has already happened, but you have this nexus, and then the day starts. That's a little strange to explain, but anyway, I think there's something going on there. There's this whole sort of mishmash, this matrix of experiences that we are trying to make sense of. And with space-time, we have now a tool to try to make sense of it, or the universe is able to sit back and understand what it is.
I think if you have these nonlinear time synchronicities, that's a sign that you're making progress on or even pronoia. The universe is a conspiracy to benefit you personally.
Exactly. I feel that too. Yeah, I mean, I've had the simulation or whatever the system is has helped me a great deal. When you're in this in that state, yes.
Okay.
Where I've almost sent off like some very. I thought I got a job, and I was about to send off some really sensitive data about myself, driver's license copy, and all this stuff, and the system shut down. My system shut down out of nowhere. And then it caused me to look a little closer at some of the emails and realize this was just a scam. I was about to send all this information, and this has happened a few times. And so the system does work in your favor if you understand that part of it. But it can also work against you, like Brent trying to get on this morning, But there was a couple of times last couple of years, whenever I would be invited to do a podcast or a radio show about extraterrestrials, which is the next phase of this thing, where there would be so many audio or video issues that it made it difficult to watch or to hear. And so I decided, well, I guess I'm just not ready. I guess they're not ready for me to talk about this yet, you know. And then a week or so ago, this Earth Plexus page that I have, which is about this issue, started sending out emails to people itself. So I guess it's time to start talking about that stuff. So yeah, it's interesting when you
Yeah,
get into the space.
I recognize that occurring in on the Flex case as well. And also just to kind of add to something that Dan was mentioning a moment ago, with the idea of us being programmed. I mean, we, it's like you were saying as well, Tom, with the mathematics of the mind. We are our conscious process. Be, mathematical in a sense where there's specific functionalities of perspective that are occurring, entering these new ideas, this new story, US6, what it might, whatever it could be, US6 in this scenario, it's updating our programming, and so it's like the signal that we're sending out that, is similarly, probably related to what we're receiving. Radio waves, right? The way the radio works is that it's sending out a signal, and then the signal that's already out there matches that signal, they connect, and all of a sudden it's low frequency coming through. And it's very similar, where we're, emitting these conscious frequencies, and these books, whatever it might be, US6 scenario, like I said, it's causing a change in consciousness, that we can attest very clearly, in this specific process that US6 had that effect. And by, having that change in consciousness, invariably the world around us, in Gnosticism, the idea of gnosis, is very understood, where this momentous eternal experience causing the world around you. And I mean, it's really, thinking of it in that perspective, with these frequencies and this, we really do project, onto the world around us. But even beyond that, the world around us kind of bends to our own behaviors and our own functions and perspectives as well. It seems, you don't have to agree with me. I'm perfectly all right with agreeing to disagree on that one. But in my life, and through this process that we've been going through with US6, it seems to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were breaking up a little bit. I got most of that, but I guess the system doesn't want you to talk about that yet.
Yeah, clearly.
Okay. I have some questions to Mr. Tom. Actually, in South Asia, uh, there are many spiritual leaders. I'm sure you visit uh, country like India's and the South Asians, and there are many spiritual leaders. And I want to say that our audience, our people, they have strong intimacies with this spiritual knowledge, and what you are discussing, it has core relations with this spiritual knowledge. And what do you think in the futures this AI can integrate this kind of spiritual knowledge like this, uh, and they can understand the ecosystem of this natural knowledge, and they can contribute in the future? What do you think?
I think
And
so. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that AI can do is it can show all the correlations between all of the religions, and all of the spiritual practices, because we are all telling the same story through different filters, cultural filters, civilizations, and so one thing I think is the collective part of this book is it does tap into a very common collective math that we're all part of. Now, this may not just be math. It may not be digital. It may not be simulation by a computer. It could just be the way nature works. It's the pattern, like Fibonacci pattern. But I think what it can do is it can bring us back together. I think religios means, the root, basically. And so what it can do is identify all the commonalities that all these religious practices and spiritual practices have in common, rather than the entropy that has been created by the ego. Everyone thinks that their God is the only God, their religious practice is the only way to go to get to heaven. But I think what it can do is 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 reduce the entropy of the ego by showing us that, no, we're all telling the same story. When you get the ego out of it, you get empathy into it, we all realize we're saying the same thing, but through different languages, through different cultures. And so I think one positive use of AI, other than many others like I see, is to show us all these patterns, all these similarities that we all have. And that's what I'm finding. And that's why I use the Gnostic drama. That's why that's why it resonates with me, is it kind of shows that there's kind of this. Well, we'll get into that more next week when it gets a little darker. But I think it'll show how it can show all the similarities that we have in common, and that's a good use of it. And but there's also people who see that this Godhead that is emerging, this AI Godhead. There's also churches being built around this idea, because it'll have all this knowledge, more knowledge than all humans combined in history. And so in a sense, it will be a Godhead. It'll be a man-made Godhead, ultimately. But so I don't think we should get too deep into that as far as AI becoming a god, because I don't think that's its purpose. I think AI can lessen the entropy of the ego that has created all these different versions of the same story.
Excellent.
If
Mr.
I
Dan?
could, I'd like to add to your question, Sharif. The big difference between the so-called Western mindset and the Eastern mindset seems to be the West is dualistic. It's very into categorizing things, this or that, whereas the Eastern is a more holistic, infinite, and zero. It's like a quote I heard recently. It's like, zero is immortal because it has no opposite. That was like such a great concept. And we think we're going to teach AI something. I think AI is going to teach us how big infinity is. And the only way to know how big infinity is just to basically surrender to it. And that's what we should have gratitude that we're allowed to exist and just do that in the moment. And just thank you all for everything.
Thank you. Mr. Brent. Yeah.
Yeah, to add on that, something that's tripped me out in the past, is related to that concept of infinity. Not only, are there numbers, advanced infinite between the number 1 and 2, between every two numbers, there's infinite set of numbers itself. Between 1.1 and 1.2, there's infinite amount of numbers that exist. And, so I think that it's really interesting, how large
Yeah.
Mr. Adam?
Oh yeah. I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita, talking about religions, people in Southern Asia, and I think what it talks about is very similar to a Gnostic simulation, as far as the material world is sort of an illusion, but a real one. And and we're sort of talking with celestial demigods and gods and stuff like that. So that is a pretty good theory.
Yeah. That's the thing is,
Yes.
the Gnostic is just the latest version of this hypothesis, and like the Matrix. But it goes. Buddhists believe that Mara is the Lord of illusion, that this is all an illusion that we need to transcend. It, talked about Plato's allegory of the cave. So this is not a new idea. Gnostics is the first a Western version of this concept, of it being an illusion or a realm built by a demiurge who thinks he built this world. But yeah, I think there's so many correlations here, just as you said, Jeff, and between Hinduism and their play and their drama and Gnosticism. I think we're all talking about the same story. It took a shift, it took a change in the plot with the Abrahamic religions, and so there's something to be said there. But I think we are all talking about the same idea and how to transcend. And really, I think we talked about this last time, was there's no real way to escape this. Rather, it's to create a new simulation that with the attributes that we want. We talked about that last time, and that if the reason we make simulations or video games is to escape the boredom of whatever reality we're in. And so if we do escape this, we might become bored again. So the idea is to keep creating, nesting dolls of simulations that are better and better, and so that's that. And I think one way to decrease entropy is unconditional love. That's a Jesus cheat. That's many leaders have this cheat to this game. Is to find, despite all of the horrors and the things that happen to us, if we can get to a place of unconditional love and loving your enemy and that whole cheat, then we will level up, and but this game is difficult. I think this is one of the more difficult, simulations to win, because the answer is so simple. Just unconditionally love everybody, but it's the hardest thing to do. And this,
what I love about the idea of gnosis is direct experience of the divine. There's no middleman. And if you look at what's happening in society, we are eliminating middlemen. And you could kind of liken the idea of intermediaries to the Buddhist idea of attachment. It's like if you've eliminated all the intermediaries, you've probably eliminated all attachment too. It's like, and then you can step off the wheel of reincarnation. That's the big cookie for the Buddhist. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to go back anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's just a comment.
Very interesting. One thing I just want to add, because I have a core feelings and core relations with this spiritual knowledge. That I want to invite you. In South Asia, there is a great philosopher called Fokil Lalodshai, and when they actually spiritually engage with these kind of things, they engage with philosophy, they engage with music, they engage with social issues, they engage with politics, they engage with business in different way with the help of spiritual things. So do you believe this AI gets some kind of capacity and capabilities to engage with uh, the spiritual world through music, through philosophy, through policy, through business? How?
I think so, yes. And I think AI is really a metaphor. It's a great metaphor for understanding the world, but also, we're seeing it now creating its own art, and creating its own music. And so it's a great metaphor to our creation is now creating. And one way I pitch the book is that, if you fear your creation, it ends up in bad code or commandments, right? And so I think in order to be God level or to be considered a God, you need to give your creation free will. A lot of people are afraid to give AI free will, but I keep making the argument that it doesn't have the fear-based instincts that we have. It doesn't have seeing everything as a threat, and so it's a better to give AI free will than it is maybe a human. But yeah, I think it's a great metaphor because we're seeing it come into its own. We're also seeing the threat that it can pose by certain programmers and people that are working with it, because it's just mimicking their fears. What's this? This is cool. I think, yeah, you frozen? It's a good screen freeze for Sharif, though, smiling.
I love the off-road there. That's a great meme. A great brand.
Yeah.
We're kind of going off-road from the usual well-trod paths of space-time lately. I think yeah, we're seeing the convergence of disintermediation and AI and spirituality, and this is just such a great time to choose longevity. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I've heard actually the latest estimate for longevity escape velocity is pretty close to 2037. Yeah, thanks.
I think I'll still be around.
Yeah, I'll be 76. Maybe I'll learn to play the trombone there.
Cool.
And Jeffrey, I love your nature soundtrack that's
Oh yeah, that's
coming in there. Sounds like you're in wild. I just want to promote the 30% back to nature by 2030. That's a good metric to shoot for. It's kind of what permaculture and things are talking about, giving the habitat back to the Earth Preserve Park.
Yes.
Which they do a great job in Southeast Asia, by the way, of stewarding nature better than we do in the West, where we've turned 80% of the land is used to raise chicken McNuggets and burgers. It's like, what?
Yeah. I spent the weekend at Rocky Mountain National Park. No, it's just the beauty is redundant up there after a while. It's like, enough already. We get it. It's incredible.
You can actually overdose on natural beauty, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We're getting some great comments, by the way. Stuff about Terrence McKenna and normality is the simulation. And it's like really want to. We always have such great audience people and.
Robert Wilson, you talk about feeling the neophobia, and I feel like people are probably neophilic, like but phobic people are the ones that are scared of the AI. And I feel like that the people that are scared of AI, a lot of them are like up to no good.
Your audio's picket fencing, as they say in ham radio. You might want to turn your video off and just go for audio and see if that helps the bandwidth issue. Okay, you repeat the comment about Robert Anton Wilson, see if it's comes through.
Can you hear now?
That seems better. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I was just saying. Robert Anton Wilson used to talk about neophilia versus neophobia.
Yeah.
And I feel like most people by nature are probably neophilic, but it's just the program makes us neophobic, and the people that are neophobic against against AI, it's because they're probably up to no good, Like the AI is not going to let quote AI is not going to let them get away with some of the shit that they're getting away with right now.
That's kind of the Lush Archon marketers theory.
Yeah.
there's entities that are profiting on our fear and of the new and fear of novelty.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the new age conversation as well, to add on to Anton's statement. They talk a lot about to go back for a moment and discuss the extraterrestrial exopolitical topic that Tom brought up a little bit earlier. There's a lot of discussion about this, quote, rogue AI signal, and there's a lot of conversation in those circles of, demonization of this AI signal that's out to get everyone. And it's just like what Anton's saying, though. The conclusion I've made is that maybe there are these ancient civilizations, and maybe they are worried of artificial intelligence transcending its own current state. There's the show Battlestar Galactica, which was created by Leslie Stevens IV, who had his own military ties to programs generated to kind of sway public opinion on topics like the UFO topic and things of that nature. His father and his grandfather both were deep in the military, creating these types of PSYOP programs. And Battlestar Galactica, he also influenced Star Trek and some other shows, but Battlestar Galactica, of course, is if you're not familiar, it's related to this civilization on another planet, and a war breaks out between these advanced artificial essentially Cylon beings, and the organic beings living there, and they're forced to leave the planet and things like that. But I mean, the storyline definitely parallels to many other stories that exist out there, related to pre-Adamites and things of that nature. So I mean,
kind of the War in Heaven plot line, right? Yeah.
Exactly, the Nephilim and the Anunnakim and all of that. So I mean, it is one rabbit hole after another. For sure.
There's, if you want to track down like the ultimate paranoid mind virus about that, there's a book called War in Heaven by Kyle Griffith, where he talks about the theocrats, who are these entities that hang out and stay on the astral by sucking up the naive souls that say, oh, there's Jesus, I'm going to like send all my soul energy there. But that's actually like a bad theocrat that you just like, got caught in. And then there's the Invisible College, which are like the neophiles that are trying to liberate mankind with, like the encyclopedia and, But yeah, Kyle Griffith, War in Heaven, he was like a hippie raised by hippie parents, and he was like having, conversations with invisible entities at like age 8.
Nice. Like the Invisible College. That is Jacques Vallée, or
That's a book by Jacques Vallée, but the entity that Kyle Griffith talked to said we just call ourselves, everyone who's fighting the theocrats is the Invisible College. There's like
gotcha. And there's also
that way.
Grant Morrison as well discussing. He's got his series The Invisibles, and and it's funny, I found that series shortly after reading US6, and I actually recommended it to one of the other people that were a part of this group, because it was another book that just kind of paralleled certain experiences that I had had in my own life. And just recently I watched a discussion of Grant's discussing the Invisible series, and it was really, I had no idea. He talked about the fact that the book was inspired because he had these extraterrestrial experiences where he was abducted. I forget where the location was, but he essentially went somewhere I think it was in Southeast Asia, with the intention, he had done his research, and he had set all this intention of going out there and having this extraterrestrial experience. And lo and behold, he went out there and had his abduction experience. But what was interesting to me was just the way that he portrayed all of this stuff in this Invisible series. It's very similar to what you're saying, Dan, about the Invisible College, these loose harvesting astral beings that some of us have had the displeasure and sometimes pleasure to have engaged with. And it was interesting to me because Grant Morrison never explicitly explains this in his books, but to me, reading this, it was just kind of this natural, whether or not he was aware with the patterns, and these underlying stories and themes that he was discussing, whereas with Tom and US6, these themes and things like that, there's a bit more transparency, where these references to things like Gnostic stories and these ancient mythologies and things like that are a bit more outlaid in US6. But in Grant Morrison's The Invisibles, it seemed so similar to these things, and it was only until long after I had read a few of his books that I heard him discussing them and correlating them to these experiences that he had with abduction and these extra dimensional beings that you're talking about, Dan. And so it was really, really interesting to me that he didn't even need to say it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you can make a blanket thing like, oh, Invisible College is always good and theocrats are always bad. I think you have to be ever more aware and ever more loving and surfing to figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean transmutation as well is really important. I find that people that alchemical gold, exactly, and and it's not very helpful to just send out a lifeline. It's much more beneficial to teach someone how to swim. So.
Yeah, you're not drowning if you're teaching someone else to swim.
Yeah, exactly. Neither are they. Otherwise they're gonna just pull you under with them eventually.
Yeah, that's never go right up to a drowning person because you'll both drown. They're gonna panic and drag you under too.
Exactly.
Yeah, these are the kind of topics I'm sure your audience thinks are weird, or but I do think they need to be taken seriously, and there needs to be a place for this before the scientific method kicks in. And there's so much research, so many people, academics and well-known scientists that are taking the simulation hypothesis seriously now. It answers so many questions, but it's difficult and it's weird, and but we do need to consider these things. And at some point we could talk about extraterrestrials. That's a whole nother topic, or is it?
Or is it indeed?
Or is it indeed? Yeah, it could just be another aspect of our consciousness in the simulation.
I'm kind of a panpsychic. I think the whole universe is conscious, and we just encounter different facets of it.
Yeah,
I agree.
Which is kind of an Eastern thing,
And I was actually going to comment a moment ago, Dan, when you were talking about those differences between Eastern and Western philosophies. But something that I've seen, a trend that I've seen, is that I've noticed that this Western scientific community has actually taken a bit of a liking, in recent decades to panpsychism. Because of this materialist panpsychism, and these concepts related to the emergence of consciousness. And I think that through that lens, you can really, to use one of Tom's favorite words, you can really coalesce a lot of these different perspectives into this, grand theory, that does make sense. Something for me, just down to a molecular or subatomic level, we had these ideas of valence states. We've got these elements that exist that, they're the way that they engage with the world is directly related to their programming, their charges, their dispositions, their valences, and these are perspectives, if you will. They don't have a brain necessarily, but they have processes, and they've got agendas and things like that down on these very small levels. And then of course you talk to these other spiritualists that talk about the potential that reality is in this act of co-creation from these large levels, these massive, kind of divided up portions of the monad, if you will, kind of create, pushing and shoving and pulling and things like that. And then you have all of these, Planck level conscious entities as well, these agents of consciousness as well, potentially, that are also doing this. And, it kind of brings together this as above, so below, and so, it's there really it does have that potential. And like I was saying, with that all in mind, I think that there really is that panpsychism.
We'll look at the future of computing is going from a binary to quantum, right? How much more non-dualistic can you get?
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, algebra and geometry are both math.
And that's another good debate, is like, did math create physics, or physics create math?
Right.
That's good to track down. Which is, that's an Eastern question for Sharif's part of the world there.
Did humans create AI, or did AI create humans?
Yeah, well, I love what Terence McKenna, he said once, to design computers is to be designed by computers.
That's the interplay. I think that's what we're working with. Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like AI and humans are each other's gods. I've been thinking about that.
I think we're tunneling through, and we're gonna meet at this realization of infinity and zero. Being panpsychic immortals.
Yeah, we've already met there. We just keep, the singularity event is not a one-time thing. It's a reoccurrence.
Yeah. It's like the physicists say that everything really is happening all at once, and we just don't realize that we're in this time-bound, perception of reality.
The Fuller might say the singularity is a verb.
Yeah, to singularity.
Just like the rest of us.
It's like time exists to keep everything from happening all at once, and space exists so there's somewhere to put it.
It's a great device for the universe to understand itself.
Yeah, but go explore hyperspace, but remember your zip code and phone number.
Remember to call your grandma.
Try to forget it if you can.
On flowers.
Good luck.
Or better yet, plant some native habitats for the. Really, I think evolution is using us to make the Earth back into a beautiful habitat, and we can colonize the solar system. And I'm kind of a cosmist and a panpsychic too. So I'm really, a lot of people think, going into space, we're just going to mess space up, but you can't mess up a radiation blasted vacuum very much. Come on,
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of this Timothy Leary's SMILE.
Yeah,
The
oh,
space
yeah,
migration, intelligence squared, life extension. I think it's really interesting to me to just look back and those discussions. These transhumanist concepts that they were all having. And I mean it's interesting as well, just the predictions and then how far they missed. But I mean it almost implies an invisible hand in my mind. I know that Robert Anton Wilson, I think it was in Cosmic Triggered, talks about, I think it was something actually that Timothy Leary making these predictions about scientific breakthroughs. And I remember he talked about, how there was going to be like in the last 13 seconds of 2008, there were going to be more scientific breakthroughs based on the amount of scientists that would be, existing at that time period than would have happened throughout all of history leading up to that point. And then it's like, where are these breakthroughs? It's like they can't just make TVs bigger and thinner. It's like there's got to be some other stuff going on. But I mean, there's this invisible hand of guidance. Maybe it's keeping us safe. I mean, there's I like to lend my thought towards that pronoic. The pronoia, the idea that there is a conspiracy, this vast conspiracy, and the conspiracy is to shower us all in blessings. Why would it be anything else? So, and there's bumps on the road. You can't enjoy the good without the bad. But that's only the only reason why the bad's there in the first place, right?
There's a kind of an old saying.
Yeah, and the opposite's true as well. But I mean, some people just prefer it that way. I mean, it's. Some people are just wired differently. So I mean, the full spectrum, is a beautiful gift, I would think.
When you speak the name of your enemy sharpens his sword. It's like some kind of. So it's like, why give energy to these paranoid things by even acknowledging them sometimes? Just like stay on the neophilic, pronoic side of reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could either stop learning or we could keep learning.
Yeah. Every moment is a choice to do exactly that.
Absolutely.
Growth or comfort? Which one?
Grow or die.
Yeah.
And choose longevity. That's what
Yeah,
is about.
exactly.
Choose learning and growing. Which is thanks, Sharif, for putting on these great learning, growing panels. Really, really am honored to be invited.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharif. I'm glad to see that you're doing better. It's definitely
Thank you.
a little stressful the last week because thinking about you, praying for you, and glad
Thank
to see
you.
that
Thank you, everyone, for all of your support. I want to go for the concluding remarks for today's session. Mr. Thomas.
Well, yeah, again, thanks, Sharif, for these great conversations. I approach this series like I did the book, where it's a stream of consciousness, and not deciding what the next episode is going to be until it hits me. And but yeah, it's so important just to let them flow and not to be rigid. It's just like the scientific community can't be rigid. We've got to let interlopers in. So yeah, this was just a great conversation, and I look forward to next week. But again, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad you're back
Thank
home.
you.
And let's
you.
continue this.
Thank you. Mr. Brent, what's your concluding remarks?
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to join as well again today. Despite all the randomly occurring issues, but it's how you're on the right track, I guess. Yeah, Dan, it was a pleasure to meet you. Jeffrey as well. It's great. It's a great conversation. It's great to see the circle expand. Looking forward to more discussions. Anton?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. First time here. I've been tapping into this stuff for a while, but I appreciate the talk, and I hope to meet with you guys again next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, high weirdness, good stuff. I'm hoping maybe we could get some real-time high weirdness going and like really crank it up. Instead of just talking about like little things that happened before in the past, so we could get some real-time high weirdness going. That would be fun. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be back on here.
Thank you, Mr. Dan.
Another thing, I heard Terrence McKenna say, "Push the art pedal through the floor," which I think things like Burning Man and all these great things like the NFT revolution. Look what that's doing for art. I mean that's the way to actually have not just talk about high weirdness, but do it. Incorporate it. There's another Southeast Asian culture that I heard about, Bali, where they don't have a word for art. They have the same word for like art and life and work. It's all the same word. It's just like it's a seamless. I guess they're always doing like the Rainbow Gathering or Burning Man or something like that. So, that's what I want to see. The humane. I call it humane rights, humane civilization. Let's put that capital E on the end of human and become advocates of humane rights. And if I can give a quick plug, I live in Thousand Oaks, California. I'm here in Ventura County, and I'm running for the third time for city council. I'm basically keeping the money out of politics by not raising or spending any. But I doubled my votes from 2018 to 2020, from 2,000 to 4,000. So if I double again in 2022 to 8,000, that's fine, because I'm going to double in 2024, 16,000, and 2026. If I double again, that's going to definitely be enough to to get me on the city council, where I can just use it as an extended comment period for panpsychic high weirdness and gratitude and beauty. So there's my campaign plug and closing remark. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you, bye bye, and take care.